Okay.
Okay, so yeah.
Let's get started.
Okay, great. So I'm Laura Livesey.
And I'm Rod Solar.
And we run a company called Livesey Solar, and we are in the business of helping hospitals and doctors and business managers to grow private healthcare businesses to become the thriving practices that they are able to become. And I think what we do is help not every practice. We help practices that are really high value and really interested in providing remarkable customer care for their patients so that we can build a system for them that basically once we get that system running, the referrals alone are going to drive happy customers back to the top of the sales pipeline so that you can reduce your overall marketing costs. So that gives you an essential sort of idea of how you need to define your offering in a sense of who do you want to come to you. And you have to get really, really clear on that. And that's really what the foundation is about, is identifying who those people are, what they want, what they feel, what their average day is like. So what are the 5 essential steps that you need to grow a profitable healthcare practice?
Yeah, so I mean, there are 5 steps, and I think a lot of people can be relieved about that, because I think one of the challenges that a lot of people find when it comes to considering how to market their practice is the complexity of all the options and information that's out there that just makes everything rather confusing. So the 5 steps is an excellent way to really ground yourself to help you understand whether or not you are doing things that facilitate the movement of an individual from the awareness stage, and perhaps the stage at which they're not even aware of you, to the point where they come out the other side of the journey as a happy, excited patient who recommends you and advocates for your services wherever they can find their friends and family to listen to it.
Yeah, cool. So I think the 5 steps in a nutshell, just before we talk you through them, are marketing. So market, call, meet, price, and serve. Those are the 5 essential components that go into a really thriving healthcare practice. But we're gonna break those down for you. And I think number 1 is a kind of an interesting one, isn't it? Because it kind of has 2 steps in it. It almost has a pre-step that's required before you can even graduate to step 1.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we sometimes call this step 0. And if you think about this almost like, packing for a long journey, that's what the step's all about is, okay, like, I need a map. If I need to find out where I'm going to go, the first step is I need a map. And then once I got a map, then I have to identify who's coming with me, and how long are we going to take to get there? How much funding do I need to equip myself on this journey? And most importantly, what are the essential tools and materials I'm going to need to get me from where I start today to the end of the journey where I want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even say that the essential question hidden in all of that is, who am I? Even as a person, but who am I as a practitioner, surely? And who am I in terms of what I want out of life? The big question.
Yeah, the big question. Yeah, exactly. Which leads to the why, right? It's like, why do I want to do this? Because I'm sure those of you who are in the throes of starting a practice independently, or perhaps in the moment where you've plateaued, how much difficulty you're facing. You know how much time it takes, and the time that you're investing is often unpaid, and at the expense of all the things you could be doing with your leisure time, right? Having dinner with your family, spending time with your kids, enjoying your weekends, practicing your hobbies and your sports. All those things that you really enjoy have unfortunately been something you've had to put aside because now you're growing your practice. And that's a real challenge and a big wake-up call for a lot of people to deal with.
So let's jump into that. Let's jump into step 1 / really the prequel step, the step 0, foundation. So how do you kind of get yourself ready before you can even do step 1 to market?
I love it. The prequel. Exactly. Yeah. That's where we lay, we introduce the characters and lay the whole foundation. So, I mean, imagine this like a house, right? So in a house, what's the first thing you do? Do you start putting up the walls? Do you start painting the place? Do you start bringing in the furniture? No. The first thing you have to do is plan it all out and lay a proper foundation. And that's why we call this the foundation step. So in a foundation step, the key things that we're aiming to do is to really understand first of all, the product and market fit, right? So who are you? And how is it that you do what you do? And what do you do? But most importantly, why do you do it? And mix that with who are the customers that you're trying to attract? What do they want? And why do they want it? So if we can identify that mix and put those things together, then we know we're in a place where you're going to have a receptive market for whatever it is that you're offering.
In fact, one of our clients summed it up really well, and we hadn't even thought of it this way, but he said, what Liaison Solar does is actually we help people to find you if you is what they want. And that's a big one because not everyone wants what you want. And that's okay. We don't want everyone. We only want those people that actually will have an affinity for you.
Absolutely. And every doctor, every consultant, basically every service provider out there has strengths and they have weaknesses. So one of the key things to do at the very forefront is to understand what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and really understand how to push your strengths forward and help you identify who are the people who really are going to value those strengths. Who are the people who are prepared to pay for the strengths that you offer, and who are your folks that are going to follow you as a guide to get them to where it is that they want to go.
And that gets you to the point where now you can market, which is really step one.
Yeah. So once you have your customer avatar in mind, and we're really, really keen to help practices understand who is it that they're talking to. And exactly as Laura said, you have to understand who they are, where they are now, and where they want to go after they've worked with you as their guide. And the marketing aspect all begins in trying to generate awareness. So there's loads and loads of tactics out there. And I'm sure that you've been approached or have even tried many tactics that might have worked, and maybe a lot of them haven't worked. And I have a feeling that if you're listening to this podcast right now, you're probably in the category of where we find a lot of people, which is they've tried stuff and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the marketing side is really not working because you haven't done that prequel, that foundational step, which is who do you want to market to, and then once you know that who, you can figure out where are they hanging out online, usually, sometimes offline in terms of figuring out maybe some magazines or newspapers, but we'll go into that in another podcast and also other videos on the Trust Health website here as to why you probably want to look for online places, and then once you figure that out, where are they hanging out online, you'll know, okay, great. I need to be going after people on Facebook. I need to be paying for some ads to show up on Facebook because this is where my target group is living at the moment. This is where my ideal customer is. Or I might be wanting to use Google AdWords. Or I might want to be creating some content and finding that a lot of people are looking up a specific concern or feeling that they have around the condition they have. And I want my website to pop up. So I'm going to create a lot of content, a lot of written content, video content on my website so that I show up in organic search listings. So you have to figure out what it is that they actually need. And that's the essence of marketing, is basically getting people to find you when you is what you need. But you do it with marketing tactics that intersect with them at the moment of their need.
And the messaging in your marketing, right, is all about helping people understand and really helping you articulate how to get people from their before state to their after state. And if you focus the majority of your messaging on that, and this is opposed to focusing on your technology or focusing on your technique or talking too much about your expertise or your training or all of those things that are about you. And I think you have to remember very, very consciously and put up every single piece of marketing material up to a filter and ask yourself, is this resonating with my customer avatars' unique aspirations to get from their before state to their after state? And if you've got that sewn up, then it's really a question of executing consistently and cost effectively as often as possible. So that's the marketing step. There's many more things that we could talk about, but we need to move on to the next step, step 2, which is call.
But you'll notice that how much time we spent on the marketing step and how much care and attention we put into crafting that message. But everything else that comes after the step is equally important in the sense that you're creating a system. You're creating a cascading series of steps that you're taking people through on a journey so that they can start from feeling uncomfortable or hurt or whatever it is that they're feeling before they find you, and going through a process of being guided. And we're going to share with you what that looks like now that you've done your marketing and you've gotten the first step, which is somebody to call you or somebody to inquire on your website. So what happens next?
Well, really critical in every marketing piece that you offer, there's got to be a call to action. And most typically in situations where consultants are offering their services, it's a phone call. Where, while we're moving towards the days where we have chatbots and social media interactions and text messages and things like that, they're all definitely on the horizon and they're coming fast. But at the moment right now, still the phone call is the number one medium that is used to do what? Well, to sell treatment? No. To sell services? No. To de facto, to sell an appointment. And that's the key driver behind a phone call. That's what you want to do. And that's how you have to measure those phone calls. So one of the things I found is when we're interacting with practices is that they often don't measure the amount of call volume that they get. Yeah. And that's a challenge because you can't manage what you don't measure. If you don't know how many calls you're getting, and secondly, how many calls are converting into appointments, then you're unable really to monitor, to track, to reward, and to improve the call conversion rate. And call conversion rate is absolutely a critical KPI for any practice in business to be following day in, day out, and to dedicate a person who is responsible and accountable for that call conversion rate. And that's not likely to be just somebody who happens to be helping you with paperwork. This is usually somebody who needs training, who needs some assertiveness on the phone, and who needs to know a little bit about what it is that you're offering. But most importantly, can ask good questions. And I think that the process of asking questions on the phone is a little bit different for many. What I often hear people do at the other side of the telephone is answer a lot of questions. So the patient will call up and say, okay, I got all these questions. How much is it? That's usually where the conversation ends if you're priced high. And if they manage to get you past that point, then they'll ask more and more questions and more and more questions. And you do a really, really great job of answering those questions. But unfortunately, that's not going to do it. What you need to do is you need to engage the prospect on their level and ask them questions about who they are, what's motivating them to change, when do they want to do it, what else have they tried before, what are they looking to experience after, when they want to make the next step, which is actually booking the appointment.
Cool. Yeah. So that's step 2, and that is the call step. And the first thing we'd recommend for step 2 is there's going to be some resources below our podcast here that you're going to be able to get a link, and you're going to be able to get a tracking sheet that Rod mentioned, where you can actually see who is calling and what happened to those calls. Because oftentimes in a practice, only the calls that actually get booked in are recorded into some kind of a database system. But you're actually looking to record every single call and the fails, really, the ones that didn't book through, because that gives you that live conversion rate. So that's step 2. And then we move into step 3. So you've called, you've booked an appointment, and they're coming in. So now this step is really going to differ depending on what people are coming in for. So let's start with somebody's coming in. They're not actually ready to pay for, say, a surgery or a treatment yet. They're coming in for an initial consultation. Often it's free or for a very low value, something we call a tripwire, which is an exchange of value, high value, for a very low cost or some time. So this is somebody who's invested. They wouldn't be here in front of you if they weren't interested, and if they weren't seriously considering it. And so what you need to do is excite them at this appointment to actually become a patient, or to not want to become a patient. And let me explain. We want a clear yes or a clear no, because we're not hammering someone into something they don't want. We're very, very clear on that. This process that we're talking about at the initial appointment is very elegant and very suited for medicine. And it's really set up to guide somebody through a process so they feel better after they left the appointment, even if they said no, than when they came in, because you've helped them to make a decision. So really, we're asking questions. We're taking a leadership role at the consultation. We're doing our assessments and all the things things we need to do medically. But this is a highly psychologically important process and consultation for the patient. And we need to address their emotional needs primarily. And that may sound a little bit odd and maybe shocking for some, but we do need to highly consider what they're thinking and what they're going through at that appointment if we want to have a very successful practice and grow that practice. Because this appointment really is introducing them to your practice, saying, what is the level of quality? So does the level of customer service match the level of medical quality? That's really critical. And it's also introducing the type of people that you're going to be interacting with if there is a lot of follow-up. And a lot of medical procedures have, 1 day, 3 days, 1 month annual checkup. So you're going to really get into a relationship with somebody. And so really at this stage, we're really cementing that relationship and saying, yeah, I like you. We can do business together. We can hang out together. We can really spend time together and enjoy that process. And hopefully that's the decision they make and they say yes. But on the flip side, they might have the opposite reaction and maybe they're not right for you. And you want to know that you don't want those patients. Those are the patients that'll be the headaches, the hassles, even the legal risk down the road. So we really want to run this in a tight way so that we get a yes or a no answer. So that's really step 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. The key underscore I need to make under the step 3 me is you have to have what we call either a patient advisor or a counselor or a liaison. It doesn't matter what you call them, as long as the patient feels like that role is for them. And that person needs to be able to facilitate and really concierge the patient through the pathway. The pathway has to be organized and scripted. And I don't mean having people specifically say, specific things, but rather, we need to know where along a pathway we go and who sees whom at what level. And we need to progressively hand over the patient from one person to another so that they feel like they have one constant touch point throughout the service. And it's super important that the patient liaison sees that patient before, at the very beginning, right after reception, and really understands their motivations and understands what it is they're looking for so that they can end the consultation by asking them for the next step, which is payment to and a deposit to move to treatment. If they just show up at the end, then they look like a bill collector. So they have to really be there to make a relationship with the patient so that they can really organize themselves around the patient's journey so that they can come to them from a position of trust.
Great. So one of the things that most people think is the most important thing, and it is very important, but is not actually the essential item in making decisions, price. So you've got anxiety around price. I think almost everyone does. How much should I charge? Should I raise my prices? Is that going to make everyone go away? Is the patient making, I assume they're going down the road to, these other 2 competitors because they charge £100 less than I do. So where does price sit in this as step 4? Where do you think, or what is the most essential thing, I should say, that people need to know about pricing their services?
The number one thing that people need to know about pricing is that it's not about pricing. That pricing is all about, really, it's something objective that people can talk about, which is one of the reasons why most people, when they call a practice, they say, how much does it cost? Because most patients don't have anything else on which to base. That's
all they know to ask.
Their decision
they can't look at your CV. They have no idea.
And often they're not that interested in your CV. What they're most interested in really is what are you going to do for me? How are you going to get me to the state that I need to go to? And sometimes they're not even completely crystallized on what that state is. So you have to help them do that. But pricing is just, it's a language that we can all use in order to estimate value. But instead of allowing price to dictate how people value what we offer, I would rather provide as much value as possible so that we can then associate a price that is justifiable from that value. So with price, of course, you got to think about your competitors. You got to think about what people can afford. You have to think about ensuring that you have sufficient money coming into you to pay for not only what it costs to deliver your service, but also to leave something aside for operating expenses and additional variable expenses, but also to retain some profit. So all of these things matter in pricing. However, with that said, it's very important to consider what is the value that I provide and how am I going to price it according to that value. So just take an example, right? If you conceptualize the value of what you offer as you're going to walk in with glasses on, and I'm a laser eye surgeon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay you on a bed after we do about an hour and a half or 3 hours of tests. I'm going to lay you on the bed. And then I'm going to do a treatment that takes 15 minutes. I'm going to treat your eyes, laser them. Then all of a sudden you get up off the bed, you can see. Fantastic. Then I'm going to see you for maybe about another hour and a half over a prolonged period of time in aftercare. You sum all that up and you say that's about 7 hours of service, right? 6 hours of service. Is that how you're going to price your offering? No. What you need to do is you need to think, what kind of change am I making for this patient? Where are they before and where do they want to go after? How much am I changing their life? Because the distance between where you find them before to where you take them after is in fact how you can define the value of your service. The longer the distance, the bigger the value. Therefore, it's entirely possible to charge very high amounts as long as the patient perceives there's value. Now, this is not a sham. It's not a trick. It's really enabling you to provide the very best service you can, which is actually what patients want.
And sometimes that fits your avatar. I mean, sometimes that's we often use with very, very high end offerings and consultants. We use the words reassuringly expensive, because sometimes if somebody runs into a clinic that is excellent, really world class, but they're pricing mid-market, people, well, what's wrong here? There must be something wrong. It doesn't make any sense. Why are they cheaper than these other guys that seem to be not offering the same service? So it really is, you need to look at the competition, but that's not the only thing. You need to look at the market you're in. You need to look at the avatars you're going after. The other thing I would say about price is you also need to look at how you distribute the price, and psychologically speaking, in terms of, do you have one fee up front or do you look at financing? Financing is often something that people overlook, especially with perhaps a lower priced offering, let's say chiropractic or something like that, where an individual offering or day, if you're coming in for a session, I should say, is 70 quid or something like that. Somebody's coming in, they're getting that. But if you actually look at the value of that customer to you over 1 year or 2 years, you can start to think, okay, this person doesn't really need one session. And this is if this is true for you, then I want you to really look at this. If they truly, to get well, need 10 sessions or 15 sessions, that's really what you should be offering them if you think about offering them the best solution to their problem. And so then financing can be something that you could use for that as well. So if you have a £4,000, £5,000 procedure, that's a no-brainer. But really, we find sort of 20 to 30% increase in uptake if you have a financing option on the table. So looking at splitting up a price, and it may sound very salesy, but really you're offering people who otherwise may not be able to sort of get in the ring and actually get what they want to be able to do business with you, and happily so.
Yeah, and the final points about pricing is that there's the number one reason that consultants in private practice overwork and abandon all the things that made them happy apart from their practice is they're undercharging. So they're in a position of their own making that they have to work so hard in order to generate the money that's sufficient to fund the practice because they're underpricing, that they lose all ability to enjoy their lives, which leads to burnout and which leads to the erosion of the reason you got into practice in the first place, which is usually to get a better life as a result.
So don't look at price. The moral of the story is don't look at price as a barrier. Look at it as something that you need to consider in terms of value. So don't be so afraid of price. Try to build up the value instead. And that leads us to step 5, which is a big part of value building is the service that you offer at every step, every customer touch point, whether that's the website, even the ad that you put up, high quality and across the board, ads, website, initial phone call, consultation, premises, everything that you do, anything that somebody touches or sees, the lose, everything has to be at the level of service that you've advertised for. And it has to be at the expectation level of the avatar that you're trying to go after. I'm not saying everything needs to be extremely posh and, 4 or 5 stars, that might not be what your avatar is after. And that might not be what you are after. That's totally fine. But it has to suit the feeling that you're trying to create in the mind of your avatar. So service is critical in terms of over time, reducing your cost per lead. Why do I say that? Because your marketing, obviously, everybody that you have ringing you or emailing you, you've actually spent money for it in terms of, paying for traffic online, building a website, doing all the things that you do. So you can actually break it down into a cost per lead. Now, if you start to up your service game, and you can look at, there's a cost to that as well as offering nice refreshments, and giving people nice coffee and all that kind of thing, you actually have a cost for that. But if you start to do that, you actually end up needing to market the same or even less, because you're going to create what we call remarkable service. Remarkable. People are actually making remarks. They're telling people. And the better your service is across the board, and it's scripted and you have a process for it, the more referrals you're going to get, and the more promotion that's going to happen on your behalf, essentially for free. Of course, it's coming off the back of a lot of hard work and a lot of systems, but you are creating an environment where you can reduce your cost per lead. And that is a factor that's making your patients happy, obviously, but making you very happy too. So it's a very virtuous cycle.
And remember to surprise people consistently throughout the journey. A lot of people think that marketing is all about making promises. The reality is under-promising and then over-delivering. And I think that what you want to always be conscious of is that service is a very, very big part of marketing. Marketing is not just about getting bums on seats. It's about keeping them warm while they're there. And critically, you need to be able to offer built-in surprises, not surprises to you, obviously. You've planned them well out in advance, but built-in surprises that delight and excite customers along the way, so that you really trigger those folks who are going to go out there and tell the world about you. Every single practice, as long as you're providing a modicum of good service, is going to have what is referred to as raving fans. And those raving fans are going to go around and talk to other people about what you did. And that's really, that's a fantastic thing to have, because the more of those folks you have, as Laura said, the more free marketing you will receive from your patients, which reduces your need to invest as much money as you already do on marketing. So that brings us full circle back to marketing.
And I hope you've enjoyed our discussion today about how to grow a profitable healthcare practice using these 5 essential steps. Just to recap, the step 1 is to market. But before that, you got to figure out, who am I? Who is my ideal customer? And where do we intersect? So that then you can find them online via marketing. How do you deal with them when they first inquire? How do you turn that, how much does it cost, into somebody who's actually making a booking? That's step 2, call. Step 3 is, once they've made the booking, you're meeting with them at a consultation. So how do you turn that consultation into a yes or a no, a clear yes or a no? Hopefully yes. And just as a point of reference, if you don't have a system in place, 40 to 60% of people of initial consultations turn into a yes. If you do have a system in place, usually 60 to 80% of initial consultations turn into an actual patient. So that's a huge lever for you. And I should say as well, at the call stage, it's very similar. If you do have a process in the call, you'll get 15 to 25% of people that call you actually booking a consultation. If you do have a process, you'll often get 50 to upwards. We've seen boutique independent clinics get 80% on the phone, on the telephone, which is unreal, but it's very, very possible if you have a certain setup. So these figures are really, really exciting. So going back though, step 3, meeting. So you want to get that initial consult working out for you and turning people into patients. Step 4, get your pricing sorted out. Figure out why you're pricing, how you're pricing. Does it suit the market? Does it suit the patient? Do you have financing in place? And then step 5 is serve people in a way that creates remarks, that is remarkable, so that you can grow the thriving practice that we know that you all want.